everybody, and welcome to a new episode of We Need to Talk. I'm in a new location this week, as we can see. I'm on the ground in a corner, but this week I'm on the ground in a corner because I decided to take this week off to rest and recuperate because of the episode that we were talking about burnout. I listened to my one advice and I decided to take this week that I'm currently in off, and I was just like, okay, I'll just post a pre-recorded episode and just put that out. But then I was starting to have a lot of thoughts about this particular topic, and I was saying, okay, well, I'll give a little bit of an update on the burnout, talk about the realness of it and being in burnout, and the fact that burnout just doesn't just last a week, and how I'm coping with it. So before we get into the topic, just a little update. I've been resting, trying to sleep as much as possible, and I haven't had any clients, and I've just been journaling, drawing, listening to music, trying to meditate, trying to ground myself. Grounding yourself is actually really good and therapeutic in the time of burnout because, well, you just get back to kind of the basics, the base level of where you are, and you kind of just have to stop for a minute and center yourself. Sometimes I do this outside, but then there will be all sorts of noise if I did this outside, and I usually do it with music, but that would kind of defeat the purpose of me filming a podcast episode. So I decided, you know what, while I'm grounding, just so I don't feel as stressed about stuff, I will just relax and film this episode, be a little bit more raw about where I am mentally, and still talk about something that I really feel is a topic that needs to be talked about because it applies to everyone and the entire situation of what the world is going through. And I think it's a really good topic. So let's get into it. Alright, so this week's episode, a lot of questions have been running through my mind. So I'll read some of the questions that have been running through my mind for you. Are we letting the trauma of the past define us? Are we struggling with victim mentality? Is the world set up for us to fail? Is the world becoming impossible to live in with the cost of living? Do we just have an entitled mentality and we're becoming reckless? Where do we draw the line between being a victim of something and wanting justice and reparations, and not being the victim and not having victim mentality and letting go of the past and not letting it control you? What is worth it to keep fighting for? What is worth it to keep fighting against, and what is not? So all these questions that were just rolling through my head and have been rolling through my head for a while, because it comes up a lot in a lot of different areas when you're transitioning into the workforce, just living day-to-day life and feeling like if you're not making ends meet, feeling like there's so much pressure on you to just be successful, and sometimes it feels like if there's no end of the tunnel, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, there's no brightness, there's no, oh, well, we can see the light, we're okay, we'll be okay, this is just a hard period. It always kind of feels like, oh my goodness, this is never ending and I will suffer forever and I'll be in pain forever. And that's for some people. Obviously for others, it's not like that. And I've never met you, but I would love to have that conversation with you of how you have that mentality and how that feels for you. But there are a lot of people that I've talked to that have this feeling of just struggling a lot, and it's been brought up in the past of victim mentality and feeling like this helplessness and feeling Like, if the world is just out to get you, and the world is set up for us to fail, going to school and being like, oh, you have to go to school and get this degree, and this degree is going to help you get so many jobs, and then when you get out of school, you're not getting jobs in the field that you worked 7 years for, 4 years for, however long you worked for it. You're not getting the degrees, the jobs in that degree field. You're making minimum wage. You're not getting promotions. It's like struggling to make ends meet, as I said. And sometimes you have to be working more than one job. And it's just like, or you have people telling you that you're overqualified for something. And you're just like, what do you mean I'm overqualified? This is what I was told I needed to get into this field, to do this stuff. And you're telling me that I'm overqualified, but you're also telling me that I don't have experience, but you won't give me the opportunity to get experience. And this big cycle of, oh, I can't get this job, etc., etc. So then you feel like if you're set up to fail, because it's just like, what am I supposed to do if there's no person letting me in? Where am I supposed to fit in? And then there are not enough jobs for the amount of people. So then it's just like, how? What the hell do you want me to do? So let's explore victim mentality a little bit. Victim mentality, the mindset occurs when individuals feel powerless or perpetually at the mercy of external factors, seeing themselves as unable to change their circumstances. It's characterized by a focus on obstacles rather than potential solutions. People with this mentality might feel stuck, blaming outside forces without taking accountability for what they can control. In some cases, this mentality can lead to an overemphasis on challenges, regardless of whether they're surmountable. Okay, so basically saying powerlessness, you're like, woe is me, and I can't get out of this because X keeps happening or Y keeps happening, and there's nothing that I can do about it because everything around me just keeps failing. And I understand the definition of it, the feeling, that it's easy to just define victim mentality and say, oh, well, you're just not focusing on solutions to problems. But also, what if you do focus on solutions and you are trying, and then there's hopelessness that does come, but you try to surmount the struggles that you're having, but at the same time, more struggles keep happening, more obstacles keep happening. And then everyone will say, okay, well, life is not fair, and more struggles will keep happening. You're not just supposed to have one struggle and then get over it. But also, sometimes it feels like if struggles just keep coming, and there's never a breaking point where you have a break to not be in a struggle. So it's kind of hard to not be in that victim mentality, to not feel hopeless and powerless if you feel like if you're always being kicked when you're down. And those emotions are valid emotions. You feel a sense of betrayal from the world because you are trying things, you are doing things. Like, get that in some victim mentality, people don't try things and they just sit there and expect things to be handed to them. Hence why in the question I was talking about, do we have an entitlement mentality of expecting it to be given to us? But in this victim mentality mindset, sometimes you can find yourself trapped in a victim mentality mindset, but not on purpose. So you look for solutions, you try different solutions, and it can feel like if you get knocked down 9 times and you're supposed to get back up 10. But what if you can't find the 10th thing to get you out? because the world right now is such a harsh place. It's such a dog-eat-dog world, and it always has been a dog-eat-dog world, but it feels like if cost of living is increasing, the economy sucks, you can't get out of your parents' home, you can't have anything of your own, you're struggling to help pay the bills, to make ends meet, to have children, to survive, and it feels like if you're promised so much, and not promised in the sense of people said that you were going to have it just handed to you, but you were promised, like, if I work hard for this, if I do enough, then life will be easier. And then life isn't easier. You don't get that promise. So then it feels like if you've been lied to your entire life, because I've gone to school, I've been doing the work, I've tried, I've gotten up, I've had the breakfast, I've brushed my teeth, I've bathed, I've gone to work, I've done the cycle of the 9 to 5, I've exercised, I've done it all, and it feels like if I'm stuck and I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over and over, nothing's getting better and I'm not feeling better. So then it kind of leads into me asking the question of, is this increasingly complex world the issue instead of the victim mentality? So with an increasingly complex world, the world has undeniably changed in ways that make life more difficult for many. Economic pressures such as rising costs of living, stagnant wages, environmental issues, global pandemics, a high-paced, technology-driven society has introduced new layers of complexity. These pressures can feel overwhelming, and for many, survival feels more tenuous. It's not tenacious, it's tenuous. Issues like housing, healthcare, job security, and mental health have become increasingly daunting. So there are external factors that have kind of just started to basically screw with everybody. After COVID, during COVID, it's like the world was already going downhill, but then that kind of screwed a lot of people. A lot of people got laid off. A lot of people just lost their jobs, and now trying to work back to it. Even when you didn't lose your job was changed drastically. You couldn't go into the office, but then some employers were like, okay, well, we're out of COVID now, so you have to come back into the office. And they made steps to make it more remote, so to do it at home or come into the office, but then they're like, oh no, you have to come into the office. They put a lot of pressure on people. Like, it felt like if no one was able to deal with the trauma that they faced, and then since they weren't able to deal with the trauma that they were faced, they were kind of just forced to push through and act like if nothing happened. And that's sometimes where the victim mentality can sometimes cross over, because you could feel like, I have so many emotions, I have so much struggles, I am struggling so much, and no one is giving me a break. And you can say that no one has to give you a break, but at the same time, you're also being told, oh, you can be replaced by a human, by AI, by whatever else. And you're feeling like if you have to sacrifice your mental health, have to sacrifice everything else just to meet what everyone else is telling you. And in that case, it's like, okay, well, I haven't been able to function properly since then, but it doesn't matter. And no one cares about me. No one cares about my life. So I either have to suck it up and just go down this line of one day I will be fired, and probably like next week that day will come, or I do something drastic and end my life, or rob a bank, or commit fraud, etc. So you can see where I'm getting with the victim mentality but also the external factors are hard. The external factors are making us struggle, and feeling if you can't come up for a breath of fresh air, feeling like, okay, so what am I supposed to do? I don't want to complain, because if I complain, then that gets me fired, that gets me no job at all. I don't know how to get out of this situation, because right now no one is offering opportunities. And then I could try to become an entrepreneur, but you have to fight so hard. And it's not that you're frightened of working hard, but how am I supposed to have a full-time job, raise children, be a part of society the way that society is, plus be an entrepreneur, plus extra jobs, plus everything on top of that, ignore my mental health, and dig myself out of the hole that I didn't purposely put myself in, that the world kind of dug itself into when there was a pandemic, So it's not as easy of a question as, is it just victim mentality and you need to find solutions and get over it? Is it the external world? Because there are solutions for things, but sometimes the solutions are not feasible, plausible for everybody. And then it kind of just brings you to a point where you kind of keep struggling, because that's all that makes sense to do. And that's also why mental health right now is becoming such an issue, because we're ignoring it. We're ignoring the trauma. We're ignoring the things that have happened. Which then also brought me to the question of, where do we draw the line between being the victim and wanting reparations for something, and then not having victim mentality? So where do we draw the line between victim mentality, wanting the reparations, and I'm not going to be a victim, I'm not going to let the past control me, I'm not going to let trauma define me or control me? What's the difference? How do we get from one to the end, and at which point do we get from one to the end? Because I can stay over here and be justified in staying over here, because bad things have happened and trauma has happened, and I have every right to feel what I'm feeling and to want justice for what I've been through, to want reparations for what I've been through. But then also, I can't keep staying in this trauma, because I'm not really fighting the trauma necessarily by being placing myself in it and saying, okay, somebody has to help me with this trauma. And I'm going to use the example of slavery, and how people say, okay, well, that injustice is still happening, slavery is still happening, it's just not as open and out in for everyone to see. So I want justice. I want the reparations for it. I feel like if white people need to pay for what they did to black people or any other person of color, and they need to fix this. We need equity, so that we could get back on the equal level, because we were pushed down so far, and we were pushed into poverty and pushed where we don't get the same things that everybody else gets. We're not equals. Even though it's no longer happening, we don't get the same things. We have to fight harder to get there. You guys get to stand on your pedestal and have your nepotism going on, and the nepo babies just get to keep having the money and keep going on the loop of all that's been going on. On the other hand, it's like some people can say, okay, but let go of slavery, because although it's still happening to whatever degree, it's not happening as much. Black people are now higher up in the workforce, and women are coming up in the workforce and it's not as bad as it used to be, and you can make a difference if you come into the workforce and you fight it that way instead of thinking about trauma and just going slavery. So both sides can have their argument. Which side is the right side to be on? Which side am I supposed to sit? So am I supposed to say, no, this trauma happened to me and I need it to be dealt with? Or am I supposed to say, okay, some people have dealt with it in the past and let me take on from where I think they've left off, and let me make solutions, like let me work on the solutions that I think will be more beneficial than trying to get reparations and justice for what has happened. Some people see it as the same thing, but for this instance, it kind of seems like two different things. And then I'll give another example of like families. So let's say you've been abandoned, you've had sexual assault done to you, physical assault done to you, any type of assault done to you, any sort of trauma done to you in a familial relationship, in a friendship relationship, and you can say, okay, you did this to me, I can't get over it, it affects me for the rest of my life. Because it does affect me for the rest of my life. It is a part of who I am now. It doesn't define me. I'm not just that traumatic thing that happened to me, but it does influence how I think, how I trust people, how I interact with people, how I emote, how I emotionally regulate, my emotional intelligence. Everything has changed because of that moment. There is no denying that everything has changed because of that moment, because you have been through that experience. You are no longer the person that you were, and you're no longer able to become the person that you were about to become before that experience happened to you. And you can want the justice for that experience that happened to you. You can keep saying, like, you've never said sorry to me, you've never been sorry, you've never, because sometimes, like, it's a human thing to want people to be sorry, to want people to change, to want things to be better, to want back the childhood that you had if it happened during your childhood, to want back the life, the experiences that you were supposed to have or did have to some extent. It's natural to want those back and to say, I need my life back. You took it from me, and since you took it from me, I have every right to keep reminding you day in and day out, every day for the rest of your life. You might get sick of listening to me say that you did this to me, but that doesn't matter because you still did it to me. The consequences of what you've done to me has already happened, and there's no undoing it. Okay? So we have that side of it. And then the other side would be like, you are just having a victim mentality. Get over it. You're not powerless. You're not helpless. You're not stuck in that situation anymore. You are now better. You can grow from it. You can become stronger. You can become a person who helps people who have experienced things like that. You can use that to utilize the strengths that you have inside of you, the new power that you can find inside of you to become a bigger, better person than you would have become. That experience can shape you for the positive if you want it to shape you for the positive. And I feel like both emotions are valid, both sides are valid, and who gets to say which side I have to be on? Who gets to say, oh, I need to get over something, or I have to be positive? Because you can stick in the negative, like, and sometimes it's not even being in the negative wanting the reparations. It's being like, okay, no, I think that justice needs to happen in this particular way. But then we have to face the fact that sometimes you're never going to get the justice that you want. Sometimes you're never going to get the reparations that you want. But do you keep fighting for it? What is worth fighting for? What is worth fighting against? At which point do you draw the line and say, okay, I need to get out of this victim mentality? Or is it even victim mentality, or is it entitlement? Are you feeling like if you're entitled to justice, or a life that's better, because we can talk about growing up and our parents struggled a lot, especially if you're a person of color or just growing up in a third world country or a country that's not America or something like America. Like, I'm not even going to say like. And there's still poverty in America. I was just making a joke. Just saying. So your parents struggled and they didn't have the education because either their parents couldn't afford for them to have the education, they weren't smart enough. I don't know if to say they weren't smart enough. They just didn't have the opportunities to have the education. They, from young, their parents probably didn't have any of the education and just had like the street smarts of it and not the book smarts of it. So they taught their children that way, and the children learned that way. So then when book smarts came into it, it's like, I don't know how to function like this. I can function in the real world, but I can't function academically. Anyways, so your parents would have wanted different for you. So they would have been like, no, you have to go to school, you have to go to college, you have to be the first to go to university, and you have to be the first to graduate and get honors and succeed and get a job, and life has to be easier for you. But then when you get pushed out of the nest, life isn't necessarily easier for you because you started on a ledge that your parents have put you on, because they've built up from the ground up to get to this ledge, and they have you on this ledge. And let's think of it like a bird, and you push your little birdie off and you say, okay, fly. But sometimes the world around you, especially if you're not a Nepo baby, when you get pushed off, you might not fly, you might fall and crash and burn. And sometimes parents aren't capable of helping you get back up. Some of them are capable of helping you get back up. Some of them don't care. They're like, I did what I had to do. I was parent enough, and now you're 18 or you're an adult and you can do whatever it is that you have to do, and I don't have to help you anymore. I feel like there's an intersection between both. So in reality, it's like a mix. Some individuals may adopt a victim mentality in response to very real changes, amplify their feelings of helplessness. Meanwhile, systemic issues, economic inequality, political instability, climate change are making life genuinely harder for vast groups of people, and navigating these is no simple task. So the struggle is a combination of both personal mindset and external forces. Balancing resilience with understanding of a broader socioeconomic and environmental context is key. Addressing the root cause while encouraging individuals' empowerment is often the best approach to breaking cycles of helplessness while tackling the real problems that persist. I want to break down the are we letting trauma define us? So the past shapes who we are, but sometimes it's a double-edged sword. When we allow unresolved trauma to dictate our identity, we may feel stuck in a cycle of pain. The difference between remembering the past and being defined by it lies in our ability to process, heal, move forward. While we cannot erase trauma, we can work to redefine its impact on our lives. There's a delicate balance between acknowledging trauma and not letting it dictate our future actions or limit our potential. So I feel like that speaks for a lot of what I was giving with the examples and the questioning earlier. Like, with victim mentality, you're stuck in the hopelessness, yes, and you're stuck feeling the hurt and the trauma and the harm, and sometimes it's very difficult to get out of that. But we can then talk about forgiveness, and I know people bring up forgive and forget, and it seems so easy to talk about forgiveness in a light of, oh, well, I'll just say that I forgive and forget, but really and truly I'm harboring onto the grudge of what this person has done to me because those experiences now define what was going on in my life. But there's a booklet of forgiveness stuff that I go through with my clients sometimes. Of you start by laying out what happened and the emotions that you felt and processing your emotions. So feeling hurt, feeling betrayed, feeling disrespected, feeling violated, feeling humiliated, embarrassed, shame, etc. And how those have affected you and affect your experiences that you're having. And then the next step is to kind of put yourself in the position of the other person, which is almost like slapping someone in the face and being like, oh, put yourself in the shoe of the person that harmed you, that did so wrong. But it's not so much to be like, oh, this person deserves to hurt you because they've been through pain themselves, but it's to shed perspective, shed a new light on things. So to be like, okay, well, this person may have gone through similar when they were younger. This person may be dealing with things currently. And sometimes you can get stuck on the so what. So what is that this person is going through this? So what that they had to deal with stuff when they were younger? So what? But it gives us a light to then be like, okay, this person, it's not as black and white. This person isn't as monstrous on its own. This person did a harmful thing, could continue to do harmful things. It does not excuse them or get rid of them taking accountability for any of the things that they have done. It allows you to have the perspective of there's more insight to this person and realizing that the person is a problem and they need to heal and they need to sort out what's going on in their lives, and the emotions that you're feeling, the shame, sometimes the guilt, has nothing to do with you. You're not the problem in the situation of the trauma. In bigger traumas of the experience itself, like reality, not necessarily a particular trauma with like assault or abandonment, but a pandemic, for example, it can show you that there are external forces and sometimes things can't be controlled, sometimes things can be controlled, but it's not on you. This was not directed at you. This wasn't purposely done to you, even though it feels that way. So it gives you a new perspective that even though you are feeling victimized by it, the looking at the bigger picture of it says, I can have my emotions, but I can also see the other perspective that everything is not black and white. There is gray to the area. And then the next step of it is figuring out if you can actually truly forgive. So letting it go. What would it take to let it go? How do you move past it? You don't have to forget that something happened to you. You can still honor and acknowledge that something has happened to you. But how do you grow? How do you move forward with the newfound knowledge of how it's possibly not to be in the situation again? Sometimes you can't control that. But how to move forward with that particular person or thing and say, okay, well, with this person, I won't trust this person anymore. I can forgive them and them not be in my lives anymore and say, I don't want anything to do with this person. I wish them well from far, or wish them not well if you choose to not want to give them that positivity. But realizing that also harboring that inside of you is just keeping a lot of negativity and using that for good. So as I just read out, it's like a thin line, a balance between acknowledging being the victim of something and having that hurt and that pain and acknowledging it and healing from it and realizing that it's okay to let it go. That doesn't erase it. That doesn't mean that there's no chance for justice in it. Because you can forgive someone, for example, like a court case, like somebody has done something to you and you've done the work to go to therapy to forgive somebody who's caused you harm, and justice can be done in a different way that is not under your control anymore. But it doesn't really matter the result of what happens there, because you have resolved within yourself that you're not going to let that define you, you're not going to let that control you, and therefore you're going to just move forward with what was being what was. It is what it is, and then moving forward with it and letting forgiveness be what pushes you forward, instead of letting vengeance or revenge or living on the seed of the past trauma just fester inside of you and think, okay, but this person did this and they can't even acknowledge it, and they can't even admit it, because justice isn't going to look like what we want it to all the time, and we can't keep wanting it to look like how we want it to look like all the time, because that's just not realistic. Sometimes it isn't going to happen the way that we want it to happen, and therefore we're going to have to say to ourselves, okay, well, I can still move forward. I don't have to be stuck. I can have this, and getting justice doesn't mean feeling helpless or powerless or hopeless, but okay, positive. So I know that that's giving a lot of to think about with victim mentality, because I've touched on various areas that you can look at victim mentality from. So it's not as simple as saying yes, staying in victim mentality is okay, or not staying in victim mentality is okay, or you have to find a fine line between, etc., etc. Like, you come from different perspectives, different emotions, really opens up the discussion of that victim mentality. When talking about harm done to you, you can have thoughts on victim mentality. When you talk about the complexities of the world and external forces like pandemics and society and economy, you'll have a different view on it. So I want to know what y'all think about victim mentality in that right, and how you feel about victim mentality. Victim mentality occurs when people see themselves as powerless and overly focused on obstacles, leading to feelings of helplessness. This mentality can develop in response to genuine hardships, but become harmful when it prevents personal accountability and resilience. However, victim mentality should not be confused with a real struggle to overcome systematic barriers or injustices. So even that part talks about the slavery thing that I was talking about earlier, and systematic barriers and trying to overcome those types of injustices. So it still begs to question sometimes, like, what's the line, and does it have to be done to one person? Does it have to be done to multiple persons? I guess that comes with the literal definition of systematic barriers. But who gets to make that call, and who gets to say that what's being done is okay or not okay, and my emotions to it are okay or not okay, or I'm playing victim, or I'm having a victim mentality, or I'm not having a victim mentality? Who gets to make that call? And let's open that discussion to talk about that. Is the world set up for us to fail? Many would argue that the world is increasingly difficult to thrive due to systematic inequalities, economic depravity, disparity, environmental degradation, and political instability. While survival may feel more tenuous, focusing only on the narrative can lead to defeatism. It is important to balance acknowledging these barriers with finding ways to adapt and overcome them. Structural changes are necessary for equitable opportunities, but individuals still play a role in navigating these changes.
That's also a lot to really focus on, because it feels like that's so contradictory as saying, yeah, you can get over it, but external factors will play a part, but also you can find a solution, but also inequality. But if you find an equitable solution, you're good to go. It's all heavy and hard to really think about and explore. Is the world becoming impossible to live in due to cost of living? For many, rising costs, stagnant wages, and housing crisis may feel unsustainable. The financial pressure has led to feelings of feeling trapped and unable to get ahead. It raises important questions about the future. Are we moving forward toward a more equitable society, or are we setting up entire generations to fail? Solutions might involve advocating for fair wages, affordable housing, and sustainable economic policies to address these growing changes. But how do we make these changes if no one wants to say anything, or no one feels like if they can say anything, or people feel like if it doesn't matter if they do say anything? Whenever we're getting pushed to vote for things, sometimes it feels like if the higher up people, whoever that may be, or a certain board or a certain group of people get to decide they get the final say. So what's the point of asking for things or trying to make these changes the non-violent way? And that's why sometimes it feels like if people have to go the violent way, and that's why they feel like if they have to steal and fight and kill to get whatever they want, because sometimes it feels like if it doesn't make a difference what I'm doing, what I'm saying, so why try that way? And that might be a defeatist attitude. That might be an entitled attitude of, oh, I should be able to say something and have it done the way that I want it to be done. But also, it does open up that conversation. And I want to know what you guys think about that. Where do we draw the line between a victim wanting justice and reparations? The key is understanding that fighting for justice and reparations comes from a place of empowerment, not victimhood. Being a victim of injustice doesn't mean passively accepting it. It means recognizing the need for systemic change and taking steps to address those wrongs. Victim mentality, on the other hand, is about staying trapped in feelings of helplessness without taking action. The line is drawn at how we choose to respond. Do we focus solely on the injustice, or do we actively work towards change? Actively working towards change starts with yourself and changing the emotions that you have, the negative feelings that you have, and really using the healing and what's inside you and your mental health to really fight for what you want based on knowing what it is that you want, and not just fighting from a negative place of I've been hurt and I think I deserve X, Y, and Z. What's worth it to keep fighting for and what's not? It's crucial to differentiate between battles that will have meaningful long-term impact and those that drain our energy will with little in return. Social justice, climate change, and economic inequality are examples of issues worth fighting for as they affect everyone's future well being. Going to school for better jobs, but feeling like if you're overqualified with no job prospects. Education was once seen as the key to upward mobility, but many are finding themselves overqualified without opportunities in their fields of study. This disconnect between education and employment is a growing issue, contributing to widespread disillusionment. Schools and workplaces may not need to adapt, offering education that's better aligned with current job marketing or job markets, providing clearer pathways to real world success. I also think that, like with internships and people putting pathways that help with the education and applying the education that we have learned, so that we see how it works in the books and then see how it works in real life, is also beneficial to people, so that we can then say, oh, this is the experience that you need, and that will be able to help you in the workforce, because sometimes you can't just go straight from the books to the workforce, and that's understandable, but also you do need the hands-on experience, and the generations above you need to take the time to explain to you how they need to transition you, just like how they transition themselves. But sometimes it feels like if people don't want to give that lending hand, because they feel like if they're going to be replaced. So how do you transition these new people into the workplace, extend the retirement age, not let the people feel like if they're being replaced, also helping them to get further educated, because sometimes they've left school for so long that they need education. So learning from each other, how do we facilitate that growth of environment, that growth of education, where one person doesn't feel like if the younger generation is coming in to step on them and to treat them like if they're stupid, and then the younger generation doesn't feel as though the older generation is stopping them from progressing and getting a promotion just because they don't want to be stepped on. Being in debt, living on minimum wage to survive. For many, going into debt is necessary just to secure basic needs like education, healthcare, or housing. Yet they're left paying the price for survival, not thriving. Minimum wage jobs often provide little upward mobility, leading to feelings of being stuck in the cycle of poverty. There's a collective struggle that many face, and these speak to larger systemic issues that need to be addressed: wage inequality, lack of job security, and inadequate social support system. Everyone is struggling. Are we all just victims? While it may feel like everyone is struggling, their shared experiences can be empowering rather than paralyzing if it leads to collective action. Seeing ourselves as a victim across the board doesn't help, but recognizing the systemic nature of the struggles we face can unite us in seeking structural change. We're not helpless, but neither should we deny that the real struggles and real challenges of the world are present. So these are some of the questions and talking points of today's episode. There's a lot that I feel that we could continue to talk about, and I really hope that you comment in the comment section some of your thoughts, some of your questions, some of your feelings on things that I've said. Could be on the first half where I just talked about examples, could be on the second half where I said questions slash comments or statements and then read feelings about those things. So I would like you to be a little bit more interactive this week, please, and open up this conversation. Let's talk about it. We need to talk about it because this is a very interesting topic. So, all right. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of We Need to Talk. I'll see you next week. Please like, comment, and share. Also subscribe. And if you would like to share your story or a topic or anything, you can reach out to us at Phoenix Counseling Services BDS at gmail.com. You can visit our website at www.phoenixcounselingservicesbds.com. Yeah, bye.